All right, I'm going to have you guys open up to your next available page in your language composition notebook, and up at the top, you are going to write intensive and reflexive pronouns. Okay, so two types of pronouns that we're looking at today, and they kind of do opposite things. They're not necessarily related things, but kind of at the same time. So we're going to look at intensive first. I'm going to put it in all caps. Intensive pronouns. Draw attention to or intensifies a noun or pronoun. Okay, so singular intensive pronouns. Myself, yourself, himself, herself, and itself. Do you see a pattern here? Okay, plural. Ourselves, yourselves, themselves. Okay, so you might see a pattern. The word self or selves at the end will probably show you that it's an intensive pronoun. Now, these pronouns could also be reflexive, but they're used in a different way. So I'm going to give you an example of an intensive pronoun. Mr. Gump himself carved the cake. Okay, so we see it intensifies. That's why it's called an intensive. Mr. Gump himself carved the cake. You could get rid of it in a sentence, and the sentence would still make sense on its own. Mr. Gump carved the cake. But by adding this in, it shows kind of like a capability that he isn't able to, or doesn't normally do that, or doesn't normally do a good job, but Mr. Gump himself carved the cake, which means he did an outstanding job. So it just adds that intensity to the sentence. Okay? Intensive pronouns, they aren't essential to a sentence meaning. Just like I said, you could get rid of it, and the sentence would still make sense on its own. Okay, so they're just extra descriptive words tied into it, basically. Okay, I'm going to do sentence makes sense without it. Okay, so Mr. Gump himself carved the cake. Mrs. Hurst herself cleaned the desks. Becca herself went to the store. So it's kind of saying that they don't normally do that, or they paid really good attention to it, and that's why that word is added in there. Okay, so go ahead and pause here if you need to finish up these notes. Otherwise, we're going to move on to reflexive. Okay, so reflexive pronouns. If you know what the word reflex means, or maybe you know a word that's pretty similar to that, you can probably start to understand what this type of pronoun is. So reflexive pronouns reflect, and I'm going to put that in quotes here, reflect back to the subject. Of a sentence. So maybe you thought of this word reflect when you heard reflexive. Think about what this word means. You're talking about something else happens, and then you're brought up with something else. So you reflect back, or you look back at something that wasn't right in the moment or right before this. So it's probably something that happened earlier on. Reflexive, they are essential to the sentence's meaning you can't get rid of them. If you do, the sentence isn't going to make sense. And I'll show you that with this example here. Example, Ellie helped herself to the cake. Okay, so Ellie helped, we got rid of it. Ellie helped to the cake. That doesn't make sense. We need this reflexive pronoun in there to say she helped herself. So Ellie and herself are reflecting to each other. Okay, so they're the same person. Silo, my dog, Silo herself chewed the bone. Okay, so that's just reflecting back to say, oh no, that would be intensive. That would be an intensive. Here's another example. She found herself eating too much candy. Okay, I know this is the same word, but you could replace he found himself, dog found itself. You could replace either of these with it. She found herself eating too much candy. If you got rid of that, she found eating too much candy. That sentence doesn't make sense without that pronoun in there, and it's reflecting back. She found herself. So they're tied together, but it's not intensifying the pronoun that's in there like an intensive pronoun is, although they are the same words. So you're going to find all of these up here are also reflexive pronouns, but they are not used in the same context. So they will be the same words, just not in the same context. Okay, so reflexive pronouns are essential to a sentence's meaning. Sentence, I'm sorry, this is an arrow. Sentence won't make sense without it. Okay. All right, so now that you have done these notes, I will zoom out and you can pause this if you need to finish up the notes. Hopefully you have the title done. It's a little cut off. But then we have a page in our packet that is called I, Myself. That is what we are going to be working on for our homework. So go ahead and pause this right now if you need to finish up the notes. Otherwise, I'm going to show you this here. So I, myself, what you're going to do is you're going to circle the intensive and reflexive pronouns in the sentences below. So look through the list that you wrote down in your composition notebook and try to find them in the sentence. So you're going to circle them. So Ned told himself it had to be a huge mistake. Himself. Okay? Now, you're going to write IP for if this is being used as an intensive pronoun or RP for reflexive. Okay? So what I would do is get rid of it in a sentence. Okay, get rid of it in the sentence and see if the sentence makes sense with it or without it. And that's going to help you if that's intensive or reflexive. Okay, Ned told it had to be a huge mistake. That doesn't make sense. So this is probably going to be reflexive pronoun. Okay, because it doesn't make sense. And it's also saying it's not Ned himself told it had to be long or a huge mistake. It's saying he told himself. So it's transferring that action to this pronoun over here, okay? The next one I'll do with you also. Delpha baked the brownies and made the punch herself. Herself is the pronoun. And if we get rid of it in the sentence, Delpha baked the brownies and made the punch. That is actually an intensive. So it's not right next to it. You could, though, put it right next to it. Delpha herself baked the brownies and made the punch. However, if you got rid of it, the sentence still makes sense without it. So this is an intensive pronoun. So this is what you're going to do for your homework. You do not need to do the review work or draft book at the bottom. Just make sure you turn this in either in class today or on your next in-person day. Thank you.